we are forging a way in a digital world that not many other companies in our space or no other company has done before, and that we have an obligation as humans to take our talents and apply them towards the human condition and the advancement of the human race.
Welcome back to Barriers to Entry, the podcast where every episode we get into it with the leaders, the designers, the early adopters, and the influencers who are helping to shape what Web3, the metaverse, the blockchain, and more will mean for our architecture and design industry. I'm Tessa Bain, and as always, I'm joined by my fabulous co-hosts, Bobby Bonett and Andrew Lane.
Hey, Tess. Thanks for the compliment.
See, it's nice when people compliment you, you know?
Yeah, I think we're generally very generous with each other. That's what makes us a great podcast team, you know? Mm-hmm. A fabulous one, even.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah, so speaking of fabulous, we have a really exciting guest joining us today. Someone who has been engaged in leading edge technology for some time, and that's really just starting to transition into the metaverse. And, you know, I think even more excitingly, the metaverse that they're applying day to day at their business, with their staff, with their clients, just a really, really fascinating and early immersive use case of everything that's possible in the space. Should we just get right into it, guys?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We're excited today to sit down with someone who is pushing the envelope and aiming to push the A&D industry forward. Erin McDannald is the CEO at Lighting Environments, which represents the world's premier lighting manufacturers. Erin is also the CEO of Environments by LE, a metaverse workplace that we had the opportunity to experience firsthand just a few weeks ago. She kicked off the year by talking metaverse at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and today she's joining us on Barriers to Entry. Welcome to the Pod Squad, Erin.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you, and we wanted to start off by asking about your journey. You started at LE in specification sales back in 2003. You made partner in 2009, and were named CEO in 2017. So can you tell us about that journey up the flagpole and to where you are now?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I studied interior design in college, and I stumbled into the lighting world and really loved many aspects of the lighting industry. I love that lighting could be quantified by math, and it was an art form in itself. Having a background in design, that was important to me. And the business of lighting was really fascinating to me. There weren't very many women in the sector at the time, believe it or not, even in 2003. And so I had the opportunity to use some of the more nurturing aspects of my personality to grow the business.
How early in your career did you set your sights on CEO at LE? I mean, when you walked in the door, you were thinking, one day I'm going to be sitting in that corner office, and
that's a very Gen Z. I don't think we had those opinions as young workers in 2003 yet.
Well, I'm a Gen Xer, and it's interesting because in every job that I had been in before, I accidentally stumbled into management. So I think I've just was a natural born leader. It's a role that I'm really comfortable in. And so the answer to that question is right away. Yeah, I really embraced working for lighting environments, and I was given a lot of freedom to explore the way I wanted to grow the business. And so in that came a lot of buy-in, and it was easy to be invested in the company and in the people.
Okay, so it's 2017. You've been climbing the ladder for 14 years to achieve your day one objective. What are some of the early challenges that you faced taking over that leadership role? And like 2017 is just a little bit pre-pandemic as well. So you were about to launch into an extreme period of change that may not have ended just yet. Can you talk about that progression?
Yeah, I became an owner in 2008 and the CEO in 2017. And I really learned how to operate a business and survive and thrive in chaos, because the beginning of my ownership started in the middle of the real estate retraction. And I thought that was really interesting. So we started with a limited budget. I started with having to make difficult decisions right away in 2008, 2009. So I was ready as a CEO coming into it. We were ready for whatever was next. We didn't know what was next, but we knew something would come. And I've always been one of these types of people who likes to put something away for a rainy day. So we were sort of waiting on the next recession. and seeing what was going to happen. And we always find that an interesting time to gain market share.
So, Andrew referenced the pandemic. I mean, things changed for our entire industry in 2020. How was lighting specification affected in particular at the onset of the pandemic? And then as a follow-on to that, how did lighting environments respond to and adjust to remote work early in those days?
Right. Well, I couldn't sell digitally very well. We were kind of limited to a couple of channels during the pandemic, Instagram and Zoom. And that was a real challenge for me during the pandemic. And our job is to sell lights. So we kind of had to pivot. We were ready for rainy days. I've always preached to my company that we want to have ninja-like agility, which, I have a little bit of
That's a new t-shirt, I think.
Yeah. Ninja-like
Yes.
agility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I wanted to be able to pivot and be ready. I knew that pre-pandemic that the path to growth was through technology, and we were already organizing our Internet of Things sector of our business. But during the pandemic, we had to pivot quickly. We all went home immediately, and I started to gather data on our space right away. I thought we were lucky to have the opportunity to have the time to have our space empty and have a mean of data to be able to compare when people came back. And I found that to be a really valuable thing. So we were ready, and we're in the middle of writing software. We just started writing software during the pandemic to connect our IoT platform together, learning how to install the IoT products within spaces to create intelligent buildings. And we were just couldn't see our people, and that was an issue for me. So we are designers and architects that work in the lighting realm, and we're used to working in programs like Revit and AutoCAD that show our drawings. So we literally started by putting our Revit drawing in a gaming platform to see what would happen.
I think it's an exciting kind of opportunity to make a quick pivot there. Was there anything that you'd learned from the focus that you already had on technology and the work you were doing in IoT that you were able to apply or that helped you as you started to pivot into this world of virtual spaces?
Well, it was interesting. We started during the pandemic in distribution centers, and we found that was an immediate need for IoT. People wanted to know where their forklifts were, and they wanted to understand how their refrigerators, what temperatures they were operating at, and where their stock was within their space. We learned very quickly how to utilize real estate in that way, where to put stock so that we could optimize the performance of those spaces. But our bread and butter for lighting is the corporate work office space. And so we started to apply the things that we learned in the warehousing spaces and how to utilize real estate and applied it to the workspace.
How has buy-in been within the organization as you've leaned into technologies like that? Because change can be hard for some individuals. Was there an effect you saw on staff, or were folks excited to be, on the cutting edge from a technology standpoint?
It depended on the generation, and it literally breaks down to those lines, but it has been really interesting. I think that the first mistake I made was I said metaverse. And they heard metaverse and were immediately afraid of what, being tracked and all the nuances that go along with what the metaverse seems to be. Needs a little bit of a rebrand, if you ask me. But yeah, when I said metaverse, everybody was immediately closed to the idea, and I had a big hill to climb. After a little while, they began to see what we were doing, connecting our building controls to our digital twin, and the vision of what I was trying to attain became more clear to them. And I stopped saying the word metaverse. And we just introduced it as a new program, and they've taken to it pretty well. What's interesting, I think one of the surprises that we found was that there's a lot of joy in the workplace that was missing for a long time. That we take aspects from the gaming world and apply them to our digital twin and put people in them and collaborate in them. And so I think that's really interesting. But the aspect of joy and the retention of memory within those spaces has been remarkably surprising to me.
It's interesting the way that we've called it the M word on this podcast with more than one guest. And it's interesting the way that a word can get stigma or feelings attached to it. And it's interesting even further that when you're able to get past that word and have all of the same principles, but speak about it in the actual context of your business, that perceptions really change. Like, I love that you bring up the word joy, but what were some of the other ways that you started to speak about this space and how it was going to, impact the work experience that allowed you to stop using the M word?
We just started to create purpose. And I think purpose is key. I think that metaverse gets a bad name because it has an association for anything. You can do anything in the metaverse that you can possibly imagine. When you create purpose, then focus attention in certain areas. So for the sales team, in order to get the sales team in, we had to build a showroom. We had to be able to build these, interactive experiences so that people could go in and experience our lights in a way that we couldn't show them in the real world. Oftentimes, the idea when an architect or a designer is working on a park, they'd love to see the street lights that they were, or the pedestrian lights that they're planning and putting on these parks, and to be able to experience them for yourself and be able to walk through them and walk around them and to understand what the experience is as the sun is going down and from all different perspectives, I think is really important. So purpose is key to getting people in. And the more tools you write it in for them, the more they will come and the more they will stay.
You spoke about memory retention. I'd love you to elaborate on that a little bit and how you're seeing that.
I heard a quote today. It was by Dr. Agus, and he said something to the tune of Zoom is exhausting because you're only working in a two-dimensional world and your brain is looking for the third dimension. And I thought that was really interesting. I think that it's much more human experience to be in these three-dimensional worlds. And when you're receiving information on more than one neural pathway, you're reinforcing the architecture of the memory, which is really important because, we're competing against other lighting manufacturers reps. And, then in some cases, there are the same or similar lights. I would want to be remembered with our clients and the experience that we deliver to them. So yeah, I always am thinking about how many neural pathways we can excite in a sales experience.
So this virtual world that we're talking about with Erin is the Elevated Environments Workplace, which is where Tess and I and Andrew had an opportunity to run around and experience, as I mentioned in the intro a few weeks ago. I'm wondering, beyond the feature-based incentives that you placed into that digital twin, Erin, were there business rules or guardrails or requirements you had of your staff to be in the space so that they immersed themselves in it and they became external advocates for bringing their clients and their partners into the space as well? Or was the adoption more natural?
The adoption was actually more natural. It was an invitation to be a part of something bigger. We are forging a way in a digital world that not many other companies in our space or no other company has done before, and that we have an obligation as humans to take our talents and apply them towards the human condition and the advancement of the human race. And I ultimately, fundamentally believe that if we all did the same thing, we would all be a lot better off. So I think it's tying it to a higher purpose and understanding that what we're doing is really important for the world and for the advancement of digital interfaces as we know it, and actually the human race.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to the level of engagement of the platform and also the community you've built at your business, Erin, that folks were interested in coming back. Because I know for many businesses, the first time you enter a metaverse is fun and interesting. You build community, but getting folks to come back on day 2 and day 3 and day 10 is a little more difficult. You've been live now with Elevated Environments since October. I'm wondering if you can share some of the feedback you've gotten from guests you've welcomed into the platform and maybe how that's helped inform your development roadmap as you continue to invite more individuals to experience the environment.
Yeah, but some of the things that were surprising to me is that there was a better adoption rate than I expected. And that some of the older, what I would refer to as a baby boomer generation, is advocating for it in different ways when you change the narrative on what it is. You stop calling it the metaverse and you call it the digital twin. There's a much bigger adoption. One of the biggest surprises to me, and this is fascinating, that our traffic is up in the physical world 30%. So if you want to get people back to work, you should build a digital infrastructure. One employee described it to me as they got a remote control for work. And there's a reinforcement of our brand every day in the metaverse, but there's a reinforcement of collaboration and also a reinforcement. It's created this fear of missing out a little bit. So it's been really, I was surprised to see that, but I was happy to see that the digital twin reinforces the importance of the physical real estate. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're doubling our real estate space by creating a digital twin and optimizing it to create income for us as well, in the same ways that physical real estate is doing for us.
I'm so curious about the A&D community and their response. And so my background's similar to yours in a sense, more on the furniture side. And I'm thinking, like, are we doing coffee breaks in the metaverse now? Like, what about lunch and learns? Like, how is that experience and what's the feedback that the design community is giving you?
Well, the design community is intrigued by it. They're not 100% sure what to do with digital twins yet. The consensus from the major design firms is that our Fortune 500 companies are asking for digital twins, but we don't know what to do with them. Mm-hmm. Are there coffee breaks? Yes. Are there collaboration? Are we taking walks in the metaverse and talking about things? And we are, and it's interesting to see the reactions. But I think that the coolest thing for me the other day was I was in the metaverse and I could hear that lull of chatter that you used to hear in the office when everybody was there. And it was a lull. You could hear the voices in the background. And I'm like, this is the energy that we had been missing all of this time. And it is here and it is in this digital environment. I had tears. It was a great moment because I'm like, that is that kind of energy that you're looking for and that we've been missing since we all went home in 2020.
And it's about that human connection too, because when we walk through the space, and I know we were all transitioning, I mean, that's one of the features that I think is really interesting is the change of perspective. But so we were transitioning into the outdoor garden and I was a little bit, I think I was having a drink of water or something. And it was so real in the moment when two of your team members were, I was like, wait, where'd everyone go? And they were like, oh, Tessa, they went here. You can follow them this way. I thought that's exactly the same as if I was navigating your office in person and lost my tour guide.
Yep.
Yeah, it's those moments of connection that we really experienced there.
Quick interruption from me, Amy Devers, host of the podcast Clever. I'm excited to tell you that Clever, a podcast about the creative visionaries who shape our world and culture, is a proud new member of the Surround Podcast Network. Surround is a collective of great shows from the design industry, like Inhabit from Perkins & Will, and Architecture 51020 from FX Collaborative. Head over to surroundpodcast.com and find your next favorite show.
Yeah. And then how have you found those changes in perspective might enhance that spontaneous walk that a couple of coworkers may want to take? Obviously, there's benefit in terms of showing off product in different situations, but I'm sure also for your internal staff there, you found some sort of benefit, giving them an opportunity to go outside and experience, your other environments.
Yeah, well, I think that spatial input's really important in understanding the dynamics of the workplace. And we've lost that in Zoom. And I think that we're gaining that back. I'll give an example. If you've played Roblox and they have the game Survivor or even Big Brother on there, it's a game, in one of those two games, you both get voted out by a series of people. And you're making spatial decisions based on the fact where the avatars are standing in the space. And if you can kind of just feel if they're talking offline and you're not part of the conversation. And I don't know what the mechanism and have not been able to quantify what the mechanism of how we feel and what tells we're receiving to make those decisions, but they're really important in understanding how people interact. So that spatial input and getting out of Zoom and being able to observe has really, contributed to a more seamless, I'm going to call it distributed cognition, is what we've been kind of talking about. It's really the understanding of what is going on in the society around you and the unspoken understanding of what is between people. It's this distributed cognition. I think that spatial input is really important for that. So I think that perspective's been interesting. And I cannot wait for the day that we get rid of PowerPoint and we all start walking through these immersive storytelling experiences, because I feel completely unengaged in PowerPoint. And I think there's better ways to convey your brand to your clients and your employees than PowerPoint.
Yeah, not to mention presenting a PowerPoint, speaking of the shortcomings of Zoom, is just a nightmare also, because you find yourself presenting this 2D material and then looking on the right bar of Zoom and seeing people holding back yawns. And you're like, oh, goodness, I've lost the audience. And if there was a better way, as we used to present in person, I can relate. If you're somebody listening to the show and you're thinking about launching a digital twin of your office, maybe you're thinking to yourself, what the heck do I need? Who do I need to hire? What's like the first step I take to building a virtual version of my in-person office? How did you navigate those steps? Obviously, you jumped in really quickly, it sounds, but what were some of the staff members you needed to hire, and where did you look to bring in the outside expertise, if that was required, or maybe it wasn't, in order to build the elevated environment space?
Sure. Well, in the physical world, we had the infrastructure already as a lighting rep. I mean, we know how to talk to electronic things and get them to talk back to us. And so that was an easy transition for us. But as far as the digital twin was something that we always, we built ourselves, because we are, we're Revit and AutoCAD users. And so that was easy for us to do. It was putting it in the gaming platform and getting it to interact with us was where we had to expand. We hired gaming programmers to do that. So we have 5 programmers on site right now, and we work with an offsite team of 5 as well. And we're building digital twins for people. It starts out with a Matterport or a LiDAR scan of your space, and we draw it and we bring it to life in various rendering programs, and then we instill functionality into them based on your needs. And right now it's all custom. So, but there are, different things that we can write in. And so right now we specialize in building controls, and we've also adapted our metaverse to work in the workplace.
We've talked a little bit about the talent you need in order to build this, but I'm curious, you mentioned the experience of getting your staff engaged, but how are you thinking about this in terms of attracting new talent into the firm and positioning yourself as a workplace of choice?
I do think that the metaverse brings a significant amount of brand equity to your brand. So I think that from a perspective of forward thinking, it's a great avenue to go. You can be anywhere in the world and work in the metaverse, and it can be seamless. The only problem we have is time zones at that point, but
it's a big planet. We're not going to get over that one easily. Yeah,
I know. I'm working on it, but it is interesting. We've found that we can also celebrate employees and HR as having fun with our roadmap right now, because they have a million things they'd like to implement for employees, and really understanding the employees within your space that have been there for a certain amount of time, so you can know who to ask questions of. Also, we're also designing some games, some onboarding games, so that we've had a lot of problems with onboarding since the pandemic, and that was a problem that needed to be fixed. Nobody knows anyone anymore. And I've expanded well beyond my real estate footprint now, because I was always stuck with the amount of desks that I had to fill, and now I can just double up in my digital twin. So that's been really interesting too.
Onboarding's like the universal problem of any business, obviously.
Okay, good. I don't feel too bad.
No, you shouldn't feel too bad. But you talked about, HR getting in there, and obviously sales probably has a role to play. How are you balancing your development roadmap for the product, given that you do have now some excited internal stakeholders who are going to want to see features and tools added, and obviously you have a budget associated with this and decisions to be made around what to prioritize?
Yeah, I think that's pretty easy for me because right now we're trying to understand how digital twins can generate revenue.
Mm.
So if the feature will generate revenue for the company, then it's a good idea to put it in, and that definitely takes the front of the way. Yeah.
How about data across whether it's, internal departments or external clients? I mean, there's probably a lot of interesting takeaways that your HR team would be interested in as it relates to how your staff is leveraging the environment. I'm sure the sales team is interested when somebody, a client that they bring into the space is gazing in a particular area for an extended period of time, what that might mean. So what are some of the interesting data points you're tracking, or maybe some data points that have been opened up for you as a result of having this tool in your toolkit?
Yeah, collaboration data points have been really interesting to me. We're learning who's collaborating with who. I'm learning that we've learned to really hone in on pulling data points of human behaviors so that we can influence the behaviors. We've had a lot of issues in the past with large sales CRM type programs that gave us a lot of data, but the data wasn't. It's hard to describe, but the data wasn't 360 degrees around you. You have to have the right data points in order to make the right actions. So if you're for instance, as a sales organization, I will understand what architectural accounts are performing for us, but we can't keep the data point on the fact that maybe the salesperson who was the best friend of so-and-so was doing really well in an account and they left an account and now they're not doing well. The data point is hard to define with so many human nuances. So we really shifted our perspective and started to look at behaviors instead of, particular data points. And so in order to capture human behavior, you have to have several points of data points in one space at one time. So you're measuring air quality, you're measuring where people are in the space, you're measuring what desk they booked and who they booked it next to and who they're collaborating with on a regular basis. So that was interesting. I've learned what lines are selling or will sell the most by the amount of samples that are moving in my sample room. And they're all labeled, so I know if there's a particular manufacturer and there's been no one in that row, they're not showing those samples, so that we have to do something to make change. All of the data decisions that we pulled and the analytics that we've understood, we understand now how much CO2 a human brings into our space, our physical space, and how to react to that. I often think of going into the metaverse or your digital twin, like setting up shop on the Mars. You have to, gain control of communication, and you have to understand what your environments are. And I often wondered, why don't we think of the earth like that? Why don't we think of our environments on the earth like that? We kind of take it for granted because we were born here, but we're not really thinking about how our environments are feeding us. So connecting them to the digital twin has really allowed us to look at data in a more spatial way and understand it.
Are you sharing that transparently back with employees, or at least portions of it, so that they can understand their own impact and such?
Yeah, they have a mobile app and it's a 2D interface, and it tells them what the air quality is real time, and it tells them who's in the office and what desk is booked and who booked what desk, so that there is transparency and collaboration. One of the things that we're pretty intent on is not tracking people. In a sense, we track things. So everybody has consented to understanding that we're studying how we use real estate, but we don't necessarily exactly know unless you've actually made a mark on the drawing somewhere, like if you've booked a desk yourself. But as far as real-time tracking within the space, we've chosen not to do that.
It's such an interesting approach on this physical digital, and I'm trying hard not to say fidgetal, approach to work.
Don't do it.
And I just did it. I just did it anyways. It's easy. I'd be curious to hear, do you have any unique perspectives on just based on this experience for the future of work?
Well, I have a few things. I think hybrid is here to stay for sure. And the employees have spoken, and it's sort of a new perspective on work in general. What's interesting that has happened to us, and I see it happening to other people, multi-vendor offices. So, the WeWork idea, right? So, everybody goes, well, my office has turned into a multi-vendor office space because we have these options, which means that we have some of our outsourced IT company sitting in here with us, renting desks. We have a design firm renting desks from us, and we're kind of all coming together to create really cool things and have ideas. And I'm enjoying that. And we're seeing a trend that has been interesting to us is the tiny office movement, essentially, where there's a lot of building of tiny or smaller spaces rather than big spaces in city centers. Everybody is kind of decentralizing a little bit, and there's a lot smaller offices. So to think about that, we have a similar situation. We just built an office in Richmond, and we're tying them together digitally so that we can interact that way.
It'd be interesting to see whether foot traffic migrates toward one office or the other, since each party will be able to experience the other office in a digital and physical space. I'm hoping you can maybe tell us a little bit about your roadmap and maybe one or two things that are particularly exciting to you or mind-blowing that maybe you wouldn't have envisioned to be possible a few months ago, but now they're coming into reality.
I talked a little bit about that seamless connection between the physical and virtual worlds, and that is a big deal for us. To me, that's going to be a huge day for us because that collaboration door gets opened and the accessibility door gets opened. So that means that anyone can walk up to my window in front of me and knock on the door and ask to talk to me real time. What's interesting to me when you work on Zoom or Teams particularly is you can't see behind the icon. And I love the idea of being able to see behind the icon, which is what the metaverse essentially is. So that's really exciting for us. And we're going to continue to develop that seamless connection between the physical and digital worlds. That is the long-term play of the metaverse anyway, in a sense, is combining those two worlds so that we're not stuck in our phones and distracted from life, that it seamlessly integrates into our life. So that's important. Like I said, the PowerPoints, I cannot wait for new storytelling features, and those are coming soon. And some collaboration tools that you wish you had in the physical universe. There are just simple things that notes, after you've had a conversation with somebody, you can make a quick note on them. So the next time they approach you, you remember what you talked to them last about, and it automatically comes up, and it doesn't, it can help you organize yourself in a way that you can't do in the physical universe.
Is that almost like an augmented reality layer inside your virtual reality? I love that concept.
That's my long-term roadmap. I have dreams about that as well, but we haven't started that. But I do think about being able to walk into our sample room and be able to virtually check out a sample and then walk in the physical world, and that maybe you have glasses on and you're able to see them. But one thing that we are pretty adamant on is no glasses. And that's important to us because we find that they're disorienting and they're hard to wear. And I don't think that they're sustainable in the long term. So that's why we're going the route of the physical real estate and putting in smart windows and projectors.
I also want to go back to one thing you had mentioned, Erin, which stuck out to me, which is the power of a digital twin to enhance your brand. I'm wondering how you feel about, in particular, internal brand equity amongst your staff. Now that folks aren't, sitting in a home office that doesn't really have a tie-in to your environment, and they're not watching the CEO or their head of marketing also sit in their home office, but instead everyone's congregating in an LE branded space. How is that reinforced brand equity? I know Andrew asked about recruitment earlier, but I'm wondering about maybe employee retention in the long run and just a feeling of a sense of place amongst your employees as they work for you and on your team.
Absolutely. I think you're buying into a culture essentially, when you have a digital twin and you're putting people into it and you're committing to a culture of transparency, in a sense, on both the employer and the employee part. As far as brand equity with the internal staff, I heard once that the biggest form of flattery for a baby is mimicry. And in that, I always thought that it's best to meet the human in the most human of conditions. And so there's no better digital interface for humans than one that looks like us and one that interacts with us in the way that we interact with the physical world. And I think it reflects as an investment in people. Before the pandemic, I knew the names of all the children of all of our employees, and I lost that touch, and I want that back. So, yeah, I think that brand equity, the investment in the human and telling people that we're invested in making the hybrid workplace work, because we found that we could be with our families better and we can better take care of ourselves in a way that we couldn't before. I think we have a lot of mutual respect for each other in our workplace.
I'll say, Erin, sometimes I mix up the names of my own kids so I wouldn't feel so bad about losing that touch.
Yeah, me too.
Let's head over to the plug section, Erin. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about maybe what you're working on at the larger enterprise at Lighting Environments, or maybe most specifically, especially since we've been talking about it over the last half hour or so, how folks could experience elevated environments for themselves.
Yeah, you can visit our website at www.environments.tech and fill out the form on our website, and we'd be happy to take you through a demo. There are some shots of our metaverse on that space too, so you can kind of take a look at that. But I'd love to invite anyone who's listening to come and take a tour within our metaverse. So just sign up on our website. We'll reach out to you, from retail to corporate offices to even some hospitality going on right now within digital twins, and all have different purposes, but we're having a great time.
Erin, what advice would you give, or resources that you could share with our listeners out there who are looking to get into the space or even just understand everything a little bit better?
Yeah, I think as far as advice, I think if you're looking to solve a problem, the solution should solve more than one problem. And I think that in these virtual spaces, you can solve more than one problem with one solution. So I think that's been really fun and interesting for us. And I always go back to this quote from Douglas Rushkoff, his book, Team Human. It's not a matter of rejecting the digital or the technological. It's a matter of retrieving the values that we're in danger of leaving behind and then embedding them in the digital infrastructure. And I think that's so profound, because when I give advice to people, it's just about embedding what's human about us in the digital infrastructure. And I think that would be the most important piece of advice moving forward.
Thank you so much, Erin. We really appreciate having you. Amazing insights to share. And I would encourage everybody. I'll endorse the plug. Go ahead, head over to www.environments.tech to get a tour of the elevated environment space.
He doesn't always endorse the plugs, Erin. He loves the plugs, but this is uncharted territory. So you've impressed Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby. I feel particularly special. Thank you for having me. I really had a great time.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Loved our talk with Erin today. Everything she shared is so fascinating. She really drew on so much utility. This one aligned with me, just in a background in my career being in business development and sales for manufacturers and for rep groups. So not unlike what Erin's doing in Lighting Environments. And so to actually be able to walk through the space and then to talk to her about her motivation, what inspired her, and what information they're looking to draw from this, I thought that was really fascinating, because it's a super practical way that we can start to apply this technology to what we do in our everyday lives. And I really loved hearing what she said about the feedback from the A&D community and how this was working for them as they were being taken on this journey too.
I really was going to say, building on what Tess was saying about the utility, the way that she's taken the work they did in Internet of Things and connected that into what they're doing in Metaverse was so impressive to me. The kind of data and the kind of information that's available to their employees and then soon to be the clients that they're getting onboarded with this as well. It's really a new kind of way to think about your office space and think about your environment in an industry that cares so much about, carbon neutrality and a lot of these other data points. An ability to actually see that in real time and experience that and understand Like she talked about the carbon footprint of an employee being in the office. That's really interesting stuff that people just aren't really doing around the water cooler. That I think was one of the more compelling areas of what a future workplace might look like when we start to see these phygital environments realized.
I feel like every subsequent conversation we had with Erin, there were more light bulbs going off in the room. When we were touring her virtual space, we made a couple of suggestions that she turned to her developer and had him put them on his roadmap. I mean, this is a collaborative moment for people who are experimenting, for people who are trying to get ahead of the curve here. And I think you'll find if you allow yourself to spend some time with the folks who are playing around or actually executing and activating, in this case in the metaverse, you'll start to kind of understand and feel better and get a real handle on what the applications might be. And you might start getting even more excited about this technology, because I know that Erin was another one of those folks who after our interview were like, let's schedule the follow-up in 6 months because things are happening quick here. We're excited by her roadmap, Andrew, like you said, just the connectivity she's building through IoT. It'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. A good plug on the Return podcast with Erin as well. So we'll all look forward to that. But in the meantime, we would like to thank our fabulous production team of Sam, Wize, Hannah, as well as Kasey at the Studio by Sandow. And a special shout out to the newest member of the Sandow team, Rob Schulte. Welcome aboard, Rob. Just a reminder for all you loyal listeners that Barriers to Entry is a part of the rapidly growing Surround Podcast Network. So make sure you go to Surround Podcasts, that's podcast with an S.com. Subscribe, smash that follow button, and be a part of a really exciting growing number of design conversations. And of course, as a part of that, make sure you join us next time while we continue to break down the barriers to entry.
Design is a process. It's a journey. It's a way of thinking and feeling.
Talented creators are fueled by burning curiosity, and that curiosity expands way beyond the one thing they may be known or recognized for. I'm Evan Ornston.
And I'm Josh Rubin. We're the founders of Cool Hunting, and we invite you to check out Design Tangents, our new podcast that goes behind the scenes with creative change makers to learn about their work, inspiration, challenges, and philosophies.